All right, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're not just going to break down a concept, we're actually stepping inside a story. Think of it as a dark, really theatrical fable about power, about control, and about the chaos that is always waiting just beyond the edges of our reason. So, our story kicks off in this chilling place called the Sovereign Absurd. And right away, we meet our main character, a ruler. But what's interesting is that he's not driven by greed or power or anything like that. No, his motivation is something way deeper. He is terrified of the void, of the emptiness he feels inside his own soul. His entire kingdom, it's basically one giant defense mechanism against his own personal horror. And that brings us to Act 1. The stage is set, right? And what we're about to see is the monarch's grand, but, ultimately doomed attempt to build a perfect world, a fortress against his own fear. He gives himself this title, the Arbiter of Stasis, and that name tells you everything you need to know. He's not just a king, he's basically declared himself the enemy of change itself. His whole goal is to freeze time, to stop what this story calls the spirit of becoming. That messy, chaotic, natural flow of life, dead in its tracks. So how does he do it? He builds something called the Gilded Cage, and I want you to picture this. It's a massive dome, but it's not made of iron or steel. It's built from pure, unbending logic. Every single rule is absolute. Every history book is written in stone. It's his masterpiece of control, designed to wall out the messy, unpredictable universe, and hopefully, to protect him from that gnawing emptiness inside. Okay, on to Act 2. Because let's be real, no fortress, especially one built on fear, can stand forever. The uninvited guests are here, and they are not knocking. First, out of the shadows comes the wit. And this isn't a person, it's a force. It's that sharp edge of intelligence that just slices right through all the pretense and nonsense. Next up, the hunger. And again, we're not talking about a desire for food or money. This is a much deeper, primal appetite for experience, for chaos, for the very change that the Arbiter has tried to make illegal. And finally, we have the small. And this one might be the creepiest of them all. It's that tiny, overlooked detail that can completely unravel the most grandiose plan. It's the quiet, subtle absurdity that just makes a total mockery of power. And right here, this is the core of the conflict. The king, using the only tools he knows, tries to bind them with logic and rules, what the text calls ironclad rhymes. He actually thinks he can contain these things, but he's totally missing the point of what they are. You can't use the rules of a system to control the very forces that were literally born to tear that system down. This brings us to the climax, the big confrontation. The king uses laws as his weapon. The siblings, though, well, they use something way, way more powerful. I mean, just think about that for a second. Their laughter isn't joyful, it's a weapon. It's a jagged blade of pure mockery that doesn't just chip away at the king's fortress, it cuts right through its very foundations. And just like that, it's all over. The entire massive structure of logic, that whole complex web of laws and histories that he's so carefully built to keep chaos out, it just shatters. The aftermath is total. The king's power, his so-called unearned majesty, is exposed for what it was, just a temporary deal with reality, a deal written in disappearing ink, which has just been washed away by the undeniable truth of chaos. So now we enter our final act. The fortress isn't just a pile of rubble. It's being reborn into something entirely new, something strange and wonderful, and yeah, a little bit terrifying. See, the wreckage of the Gilded Cage doesn't just sit there. It starts to twist and warp and reform itself. That grim, gray fortress of logic starts turning into a surreal playhouse. All the rigid, straight lines of the castle melt into these impossible, playful shapes. This is literally what happens when the absurd wins out over order. So, what was the siblings' real purpose in all this? They weren't just vandals, right? They were what the story calls final sentinels. Their job was to shatter flawed logic, to dismantle an ego that was built on fear, and ultimately to test what it really means to be a sovereign being. What the Arbiter went through is defined here as a necessary collapse. And yeah, it's painful, but it's absolutely essential. His world had to be destroyed because it was built on a complete lie. The lie that you can perfectly control life. It's only from those ruins that something true and authentic can finally be built. Which brings us to the final lesson of this whole dark fable. What did the siblings get out of it? What's the actual value in all this destruction? They didn't want the king's crown. They didn't want his gold. Their payment, the only thing that motivated them, was the beautiful sound of rigid expectations breaking. They live for that moment when a mind is forced open, when a tightly controlled little world explodes into limitless possibility. And what about the Arbiter? Well, he's left in the rubble, but he's not totally lost. He has a new path now. First, he had to watch his entire reality crumble into dust. Then, in its place, he gets what's called the honest currency of the absurd. His next step is to learn how to grave dance, to find joy and movement among the ruins of his old self. And by doing that, he can finally turn to face that emptiness he feared so much, and just smile. And that's where this fable leaves us, really, with a question to think about. Because, look, we all build our own gilded cages, right? Our own little systems of logic and control to feel safe. But this story is a warning that the wit, the hunger, and the small are always out there, waiting. So the question isn't if our fortress will be tested, it's what happens to us when it is.